right. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to our first Pension Consultants podcast episode. Here we are talking specifically about issues that matter most to plan sponsor, fiduciary committee members, and we're going to be covering a wide variety of topics from what should we focus on in a retirement plan, what's some of the information we need to have equipped in order to do our job well, to any number of things, regulations and things of that sort. By way of introduction, my name's Zach. I'm the CEO here at Pension Consultants, and I have with me Mr. Trenton Clines. Trenton, do you want to introduce yourself to the fine folks?
Hello, everybody. My name is Trenton Clines, and I'm a client plan manager and director of vendor outcomes here at PCI. I've been here for about 6 years and loving it.
Super. Well, great to have you, Trenton. What's cool about Trenton is Trenton has spent a lot of time working with committees one-on-one. I mean, that's pretty much everything you do is working with committees. So we have a number of things that we'll cover and talk about and go through, and your perspectives are going to be very valuable. So I want this episode to focus on big picture objectives for retirement committees. What are the most important things to focus on? What are the goals and the objectives of the committee? And that doesn't get enough focus, I think, from my perspective. We kind of dive right into the meeting. We start reviewing materials, data, information, and there doesn't seem to be that step back to say, kind of that more meta conversation. What should we be focusing on? Is that your perspective as well?
Absolutely. I 100% agree with you, Zach. I think that a lot of times we get too focused on the investments and the numbers that we see on a consistent basis, and we just want to dive into that. But really what we want to do is we want to set a performance standard and idea of what we're trying to do through the plan, and not just focus on numbers specifically every time we get together.
Yeah, that's really great. I have a number of kind of questions in front of me that we can go through together that kind of touch on this topic. But, it's so interesting. If you go into just about any meeting and, I think you could probably run this experiment, whatever that next meeting is for anybody. I mean, just look at people around you. The second there's some report or some information thrown in front of you, the focus, the energy, the conversations now all are centered around that. And so the risk, I think, from a committee perspective is not so much are we having conversations about the things in front of us, but it's what are all of the conversations we're not having because nobody's showing up to that meeting with that report and that information. There's all sorts of lawsuits that we could look at where committees get in trouble for fees or and surely those committees are not showing up to a meeting looking at, my goodness, $2 million in fees last year. I think we're okay with this. It's probably that they just never saw that in the first place. Perfect. So again, the focus of today is going to be pretty big picture on setting the goals for the committee, making sure that we're aware of what we're supposed to be focusing on. And what topics are most critical that maybe you're focusing on, maybe you're not. Maybe we need to kind of take a step back. So let me talk first about this concept of committee mindset. We recently put a piece out on our website talking about committee mindset and the kind of different types of committees that there are. Very open-ended question, Trenton. What when I say committee mindset and maybe the perspective of the committee, what things come to mind? What kind of mindsets and committee perspectives do you think come into those meetings?
Yeah, so I think really when you say committee mindset or committee objective or thoughts on a committee, what that means and how that looks within different committees, I think about what is the objective of that committee for their plan and how do they approach the plan. Most of the time, what we see is when we're talking to retirement plan committees, they have a lot of other stuff on their plate. They have their normal day-to-day job that they have to deal with. They have things going on outside of work, and then the retirement plan and being on a committee can just be an added piece, and they just want to do the bare minimum, make sure that they have a plan to offer, make sure that they don't get sued, and then they're good to go. And unfortunately, that's not meeting the standard for all of the participants and the people that we want to help get on track for retirement. And so you really have to come at creating a committee and working on a committee with a clear and objective standard for what do we want to do? What is the output that we want from this plan? And if you're a client that just says, you know what, I just want to offer it and I don't want to get sued, then you can do that. But there's a lot more that's available within the retirement plan to take advantage of to help your participants and your employees as much as you can. And that's really what we want to see. And I think what makes a difference for the employees.
Yeah, that's really great. There's so much good stuff to unpack there. I think you touched on, I think one thing all committees have in common is they don't want to show up. They don't want to get in trouble. They don't want to do something and step out of place. And so there's this showing up and focusing on all the things that could go wrong. And I think what you're trying to say is that's good, but you might actually do an even better job if you show up not focusing on all the negative things, but focusing on all the positives. And those aren't entirely overlapping, but what do you think? Can we accomplish all of the staying out of trouble by not as much focusing on staying out of trouble and instead focusing more on outcomes, purpose, having a plan that provides for those participants well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think about, and I've used this as an example before, running a retirement plan committee can kind of be similar to restoring an old car. And when I think about the issues that you have with legal things, that's like keeping oil in the car or doing an oil change. That's the basic necessity that you have to do to get that car running. But whenever you're looking at restoring that car, you get into refinishing the paint, refinishing the interior, things like that. Those are the pieces within a retirement plan that you can really expand and make that plan splash and make it work for your participants, and it can really make a big impact. But the legal pieces, that should be part of your day-to-day. That should be part of the process that we follow to get to where we're going. But it's not what we want to focus on. That should be how we handle the plan in general. And then the extra added in pieces are where we can really add value for the participants.
That was great. And keep in mind, folks, Trenton didn't even write that down. He's just showing up with the car analogy. That's great. So maybe let's try to, dig one layer deeper. We've had this very kind of abstract conversation. Let's try to maybe get into a little bit more of the details of what that means. So I think we're painting a picture of two different committees. One that's, and our marketing piece was, it's better to show up worried about all the things that could go wrong than to show up not worrying about anything at all. And that's certainly possible. I think most people that are going to watch something like this and digest this kind of content, they want to do a good job fundamentally. So I don't think we're talking to those kind of people. And then there's this one step deeper, which is to say, let's not just focus on the problem. Let's offer a really great benefit, on behalf of those participants. So let's dig a layer deeper. When it comes to reporting, it comes to KPIs. We're going to have a meeting once a quarter, twice a year, whatever it is. If I'm focusing on all the things that can go wrong, what sorts of KPIs do I want in front of me? And if I'm focusing on all the things that could go right, and I'm looking to drive this plan and the benefit of this plan for the participants, what kind of KPIs am I looking at there? And how are those two similar and how are they maybe different?
Yeah, absolutely. And really, if you're looking at just making sure that you don't get in trouble, the big answer there is fees, both investment related fees and vendor related fees. So you're looking at record keeper fees, advisor fees, auditor fees, and then also fees that are related to investments. Because when you're looking at all the recent lawsuits across our industry today, almost all of those are aligned with either vendor related fees or investment related fees. And they're built into, why are we not in a cheaper share class? Why are we in a more expensive fund if it's not adding value? And those are the areas that people look into. The other pieces where you can get into trouble and you can you can find yourself in the middle of a lawsuit or issues with the DOL or SEC is when you're looking at some of the back end, not following the plan documents correctly and running the plan based off of what somebody's assumption of the rules can be, but what might not actually be written in the plan document. So those are the areas that you see the most when it comes to the lawsuits or issues with the IRS or DOL. But the big piece is the fees related to the plan. And then if you're looking at trying to be proactive, we're not going to turn a blind eye to those things at all. We still want to look at the fees. We still want to look at the investments and the fees that are related to those investments. But we also want to focus on some other areas within each of those things. The investments, when we look at that, not only do we want an investment that is a low fee, which is great, but if we have a fund that outperforms that benchmark and they have a higher fee and net of that fee they're outperforming, then that's fine. They're adding value. Just because a fund has a lower fee doesn't mean it's better for participants. But we have to find a way to show that. And committees have to find a way to communicate that to participants or have that wrapped up in a way that they can understand to show how important it is just to add that extra value. When it comes to the fee side of things, we're looking at the vendor fees, and sometimes you might have a vendor that has a little bit of a higher fee, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they're bad or you need to change right away. Sometimes you have a situation where your plan might be a little bit more complicated, and the amount of resources that you are using from that record keeper or that vendor might not be built into that exact benchmark. So it's okay if you're a little bit high. A perfect example of this is when you look at auditors for plans that have self-directed brokerage accounts. They have to do a lot more work in that audit process than a plan that doesn't have STBAs. So whenever you go to look at those fees, they aren't really comparable. And so if you just say, oh, this fee's higher than the benchmark, we need to change, that's not fair to your participants. That's not fair to the vendor. But you need to work in some of those other pieces as the value that you're getting. You have to keep in mind some of those outside resources or those outside factors when looking at how those fees are built into the plan.
Yeah, that's again so much good info there. I think kind of the core underlying theme that you touched on perfectly is if I'm worried mostly about getting in trouble, I'm going to optimize around lowest fee. And well, if I want the lowest fee, here's the best way to do that. I can just shut the plan down. But then that's not the most important driver. The most important driver is value at the end of the day. And so that I think, I mean, am I getting at that right?
Absolutely.
It's a question of, not just simply lowest fee. There are some things that might be a little more obvious that we do want that as close to zero as possible, but there might be other things that you want to drive a little more value.
Yeah.
The investments were a good piece to touch on. There's certainly investments and asset classes where it's probably advantageous to be passive or focus mostly on fees. But surely, at least hypothetically, if we had two investments, one that's going to perform 1% higher than the other one on a gross basis, but the other one has 50% less fee or something like that, you might still want to go for the higher fee. But that's kind of the trick, right? That's the tough part. Well, how does I'll throw a curveball at you? How does the contributions piece fit into all of this when it comes to participant retirement readiness and contributions rates, participant rates, and things like that? Which type of committee is concerned about that? Yeah,
so really when it comes to the contribution side or participation rate, this is something that really gets left behind, and the participants' retirement readiness is something that gets left alone when it comes to the ERISA regulations and the standards that people have come to expect when it comes to staying safe and keeping themselves safe. Because as long as they offer the investments, as long as they have fees low, then they're safe and they don't have to worry about it. One of the pieces that people have come to tied to a successful plan is what the participation rate is. And that can be a good example for how the plan is doing. But if you have 100% of your participants saving 1%, nobody's on track to retire, right? So we want to gauge the participation not only by how many people are saving in the plan, but also the value of how they are doing within their plan. So we want to look at how many people are participating. Yes, is very important, but are they contributing enough to help meet their goals for retirement? And when we look at that, the standard across the industry is, if I go to retire, how much of my earnings am I going to need today to meet my goals in retirement? And it's around 70%, probably push it up a little bit with everything going on around the world. Might be 75, 80%, but the standard at 70% is really what we want to see those participants hit. And when you go in and look at a lot of plans, they might have high participation. They might have a lot of people saving in the plan. They might have great investments, but if people aren't saving enough to meet their goals, they're still not going to be able to retire on time and have a successful retirement, which is really what we put the plan together for as a whole. So that's the piece that without the contributions going into the plan, the other pieces really don't matter, but it gets left behind when you're talking about the litigation and the legal side, and people aren't really worried about it. And one of the biggest pieces that I think has really changed the game when it comes to these retirement plans is automatic enrollment and the benefits that has, because not only is it getting more people into the plan, it's getting people into the plan at a rate that is more beneficial to them. When you look at the Secure 2.0 regulations, they bumped that the minimum of that up to 3%. Still, I think that's a little low to get people started out at, but they set a minimum, which goes to show that they also agree we need to get people in at a beneficial rate to help get their savings started. And the auto enroll, I think, is one of the best pieces. But the second one is escalation, because we want to get them in, but we need to slowly bump their savings up to a rate that helps them meet their goals. And that's what those auto features do. But when you're looking at judging the plan as a whole to see how participants are doing, you can look at investments, you can look at fees, and those are great. But the contributions is I think, one of the most important factors that often gets overlooked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're hitting on all of the sort of things that a committee that's passionate about driving outcomes, offering the best plan that they can for the participants. Those are all the conversations you get to have over here on those committees that aren't being had over here on the overly defensive, overly, I guess, worried committee.
Yeah.
And and as we wade through the, low fees versus value question, well, how do I wrap my head around that and the difference between the two? Well, if I'm only worried about getting sued, all of a sudden that becomes a very difficult thing to weigh. Whereas if I have this guiding principle or guiding beacon of, I want this plan to be the best it can to help employees prepare for retirement, through reasonable fees, through value created through the plan, and through all of these variety of features. Now all of a sudden we've got a great plan. And I don't know about you, does that seem fairly legally defensible as well? Maybe you actually are doing a better job taking care of the legal side of things if you're focused on this.
Absolutely. I mean, the definition of being a fiduciary is doing what is in the best interest of the employees. And if you set the mission and the goals of your committee to make the best plan you can for the participants and the employees in the plan, then you are setting the standard at being a great fiduciary, which is pretty indefensible when it comes to any lawsuits or any legal issues out there. So I totally agree with you.
Right. Okay. Well, we have a number of, that we could totally get into our three key drivers and all of that kind of stuff. I'm sure we could have an hour-long conversation about that. We have, materials on our website that can point you in a good direction there, to simplify the question of, I'm on a committee, what should I focus on? Well, that's really what our three key drivers are there to answer. Let's talk about, ourselves a little bit in our industry. What role do you think the advisor plays in this world of outcome focused, goal oriented retirement plan committees?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the advisor needs to be the quarterback, right? The advisor isn't going to be the one outside of some of the investment decisions or things like that. They're not going to be the ones making the decisions and making the plays per se, but the quarterback or the advisor needs to be able to set everyone up to be in the best position possible. Everybody needs to be on the same page. Everybody needs to know what's going on. And so that aligns with some of the things that we've already talked about. And one of them is setting that standard or that goal for what we want our retirement plan to be. Zach mentioned our three key drivers, and I think that's a great place to start. Is if you have something that you focus on and as a goal for all of your clients and all the plans that you work with, then you're starting off at the right place. Everybody knows what they're trying to achieve. The next piece is putting that in motion, and that comes down into the committee meetings themselves. So the advisor needs to be the one that is running that committee meeting. We talked about agendas prior to this, and what do you need to focus on? And you mentioned when you get into a meeting and you put a report in front of everybody, everybody just wants to look at the numbers and they focus solely on what's on that report or in that document. So you need to be able to put the things that need to be talked about into that report and into that document so that you can keep people's attention on it and give it the value and the time that it deserves. And so the agenda, running the meeting, the minutes to document the fiduciary activities is a huge piece to one, kind of the backbone of keeping everybody safe and clear when it comes to the legal side of things, but also just is a great process to show that you are being a good fiduciary and that you're making the decisions for the participants. And I think that's really the role of the advisor, is to be that quarterback, to lead people. It also works with vendors as well. When you've got a record keeper and there's issues with the record keeper and there's things that need to be figured out, the advisor is there to help the client as much as they can, push conversations up the chain if they need to, work on fee renegotiations, things like that when those things come up. And the advisors, again, isn't going to be the one that's making the record keeper decision. They're not going to be the one saying, hey, you have to change your record keeper right now. We need you to go here. That's not how that works, right? But the advisor is going to be the one that says, hey, I've got a couple of clients that work with this record keeper and they do pretty well and their fees are reasonable and we work with them quite a bit. You should check them out and then document the entire process for that search or that RFP. And I think that's where the advisor plays the biggest role.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly. And again, you touched on, often it's the advisor showing up to the meeting with the materials, with the reports, and what gets put in front of people is ultimately what gets discussed. Mm-hmm. And so, tying it into my last question here, and it ties in perfectly to that. If I'm on a committee and I'm looking to improve, maybe I've got a committee that's, in general, hey, I'm the one member where I want to do something here that's above and beyond just simply offer a plan and good luck, above and beyond just simply, let me optimize around, as low as possible fees because I'm scared. Yeah. If I want to drive for that higher purpose goal, what's something I can do as a committee member to drive some change there?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is setting that goal for your plan, deciding what you want your plan to be. And when you think about it, similar to how we handle things in our everyday life or in our work, is we all have KPIs. We all have goals for what we want to get done, and how we manage or grade the work that we're doing, right? And our employees and people that we work with, we're always grading and seeing how those different factors are working within our lives. And we want to do the same thing within the retirement plan. So we want to set those standards, set KPIs, and it doesn't have to be your 3 key drivers that we talk about quite a bit. I think that's a great place to start. But set KPIs for the plan, set a standard for what you want the plan to get to. And if you set that standard and you're not meeting it, maybe you need to make a change, or maybe you need to take a little bit of a different approach. And I think that's where you want to start is, hey, how is this plan performing? Are we meeting these goals? And if we're not, then we might need to look somewhere else. And if you start there and you work to a place where you are meeting those standards, again, like we talked about earlier, if your sole purpose is to make the plan better for the participants and you're making changes to move in that direction, that's a pretty good cause. And that's pretty indefensible when it comes to any legal issues. So you're covering your back, but you're also pushing to make some changes for the better. And I think that's where you need to start is setting up those standards, getting KPIs in place to grade how things are going so that you can get that plan on track.
Yeah, that's right. It's gotta all be, those conversations with those around you on the committee, with the vendors, with maybe the advisor. Hey, why do we look at the numbers that we look at? Why do we look at the reports that we look at? Let's not go into these meetings and try to look at everything. Let's try to focus on what are going to be those drivers of results for the plan at the end of the day. And let's have focused conversations around that. And often I think it's probably more a question of what should we not talk about? What can we save for a review before or after the meeting, so that we really are more focused and prepared when we come in for those discussions and those reviews. Well, Trenton, anything else to add there? Again, a wealth of knowledge. Appreciate the perspectives there.
I think the only other thing is really just ask questions. Try to, if you're in a place where you want to improve your plan and you don't really know where to start, ask questions. Try and learn as much as you can about the information, about why things are presented the way that they are. And if you can see holes in it, or if you have more questions, keep digging. And you can look into other resources. There's a lot of stuff online, just out there on the internet, but also on our website if you want to look into that and see kind of where you should start and what questions you should ask. There's some really good things on there, and just ask questions and learn as much as you can about what you should be doing. And the more you learn, the more you'll figure out, and you'll be able to put a pretty good plan together.
Yeah, that's great. Well, again, Trenton, thank you so much. This was a fun first episode. Very high level. We touched on just, objectives, purpose. What are we trying to achieve at the end of the day? There's a much deeper level conversation that probably should happen from here. I hope you find our website useful. I hope you come back and check out some more of our podcasts and materials that we'll present in the future as we kind of dig a little deeper, talk about some of those specifics a little bit more. But thank you for spending the time with us, and thank you, Trenton, for your time as well.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you all.
All right. Bye.
Bye.